Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Known as the Energy Guy, today's guest has made his impact in locker rooms and boardrooms nationwide with his best-selling books and inspiring message. Jon Gordon is the author of the international bestseller, The Energy Bus, and a sought-after speaker on leadership, culture, sales, and teamwork. His passion is developing positive leaders and winning team cultures, whether it's working with corporate clients like Southwest Airlines and Publix, or sports teams like the Los Angeles Dodgers, Miami Heat, and Clemson Tigers. On today's episode, Jon invites us aboard the Energy Bus to share how he found renewed purpose through his own personal struggles, what he's learned about building thriving team cultures, and why positive leadership inspires high performance. Be sure to pick up his latest book, The Power of Positive Leadership, and follow Jon on Twitter at JonGordon11. I know you are going to enjoy this one a ton. Here's my conversation with Jon Gordon. So you have a new book out, The Power of Positive Leadership, which I just read, obviously, and I absolutely love it. And one of the things you talk about in the first chapter is a real turning point in your life, in your early 30s. And, you know, I know you and you radiate positivity and optimism. But here you are sort of describing yourself in the book as fearful and negative and stressed out and sort of miserable. Tell me about that turning point in your life, and how did you recognize the place you were in, and sort of what motivated you to make a change?
I think my wife helped me to recognize the place I was in because she had had enough of my negativity and honestly gave me an ultimatum, like change or our marriage was over. And I knew I needed to change. In that moment, it was like everything came to a head. I begged her to stay. She agreed to stay. I agreed to change. And that began this journey. So it was almost like her calling me out, me seeing it within myself, like, yeah, I don't like who this person is. Mm-hmm. I don't like what I've become. I've allowed the fear and the stress of life to beat me down. And I knew I needed to change. And
you did, and you've never looked back, I can tell.
Yeah, that was a defining moment in my life. One of the worst moments in my life, but also led to the best.
Right, no question. You know, I think we all at times have sort of that positive versus negative battle, right? At times kind of inside, right? Everybody has sort of these voices. And you talk about sort of that positive versus negative in one of your books, The Positive Dog, which I love as well. You know, if someone out there is listening, is in sort of a similar spot, what advice would you give them to help them make that shift?
One of the greatest things you can do is understand how thoughts work. So when you realize that those negative thoughts are not actually coming from you, even though they feel like they're inside, they're actually coming from the outside. Because the question is, who would ever choose to have a negative thought? No one would ever choose one. They come from a spiritual place, from consciousness. But just because you have a negative thought doesn't mean you have to believe it. So you don't have to believe the lie the negative thoughts are telling. Instead, you can know the truth. And the truth is that you can be great no matter what you're thinking. That in any moment, no matter what thoughts pop in your head, you can just move forward because grit is greater than thought. And belief, like this core belief and this truth that grounds you, that inspires you, that moves you forward, is greater than any negative thought you can have. So I've done this a lot with professional and college athletes.
Okay.
And when I share this with them, it's like the light bulb goes on. They are like, wow. They have an awakening and they see these negative thoughts and this fear for what it is.
Well, and that line, grit is greater than thought, is well said, right? Because if you can dig in and overcome it, and to your point, not listen to it. And do you also advise athletes to tell themselves something different in that moment? Not only not believe it, but maybe tell themselves a new word or a new phrase?
Definitely. But it's not a made up phrase. It's speak truth to the lie. And so you can make a list. I heard Jewel talk about this, the famous singer Jewel, on a podcast recently, where she talked about on the left side, she makes a list of the lies that are being told her that she's hearing. And then on the right side of the paper, she writes down the truth to those lies. And the truth is, again, that you're capable in any moment to be great. The truth is that you're worthy, even though you may feel unworthy. The truth is you have everything you need inside you to be successful. The truth is that we don't create our world outside in, we create it inside out. So it doesn't matter what circumstances are on the outside. It's about what you're doing, your passion, your spirit, your purpose, and your love every day. So I love that point that you said about, speak truth to the lie, say something different than what those thoughts are coming in, and then have, I call it an anchor of truth. Like, what could you anchor to in those moments that will keep you moving forward? Roger Federer, fifth set, Australian Open against Nadal. You probably saw it.
Sure.
He lost the first few games. And he said after the match, I said to myself, I guess it's not going to happen today. I guess it's not my day. So that's the thought that came in.
Wow.
But he didn't listen to it. He just kept playing one point at a time, just stayed in the match, just continue to move forward, and then winds up winning the match. And it just shows you that it doesn't matter what you're thinking. I talked to Phil Dawson, the 49ers kicker now, and he said some of his greatest kicks were when he felt the least confident, where he just went up and said, he just said, kick it as hard as you can. Just kick it as hard as you can and just hope it goes in. Opens his eyes almost to see, and it's going right through the goalpost. So there's this myth that you have to be confident to be great. I ask athletes all the time, have you ever been unconfident, very insecure early on, and then all of a sudden you wind up playing a great game or having a great match? Everyone shakes their head. Yes, of course. I've had that happen. We all have.
Sure.
So there's this myth that I have to be confident to be great. No, the idea is that you're not always going to feel confident. The idea is that you just continue to move forward. When those negative thoughts come in, speak truth to the lie, and then be great even when you don't feel great.
Sure. That's good stuff. I mean, that's stuff that as a business person you can take into, the next tough meeting you have or the next difficult conversation you have or big sales call, right? I mean, that's why I think, that's why I love your work, right? Because to me, sports translates so well.
Oh, they both go hand in hand. And so when I take these principles, for instance, like I was with Dell recently at their big meeting, uniting Dell and EMC. I was speaking to some of the leaders. I know you spoke at the big gathering. They actually told me you were there when I was there speaking with the leaders in Singapore and Ireland.
So that's cool. Neat.
Yeah. So, but when I take this to Dell or I was working with Southwest last year. When you speak to them about these principles, it all resonates because every one of their leaders, managers, team members, we're all dealing with the same things. We all have the negativity that comes in. We all have the things that sabotage teams. We have to create great teamwork in our offices just like we do in the sports world. So everything really goes hand in hand, and the same principles apply, as you know.
Totally, yeah. In Chapter 10, you talk about purpose, and I highlighted this line. You said, motivation doesn't last, but purpose-driven motivation does. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, more people die Monday morning at 9 a.m. than any other time. Think about that. People would rather die than go to work.
Wow. That is horrifying. Jeez.
Yeah, because they don't have a purpose, right? So
sure.
Goals and numbers, they'll motivate you in the short run, but only purpose will drive you in the long run. And there are going to be days we get up, we don't feel very positive. You walk into school as a teacher. You go into the office for a sales meeting. You're making a call day in and day out with customers and clients. There are going to be days you don't feel very positive, and that's when you have to have a bigger purpose that gives you something to be positive about. That purpose is the ultimate fuel that drives you. And the research shows that people are most energized when they're using their strengths for a bigger purpose beyond themselves.
Well, purpose does. I mean, purpose drives us all to do great things, I think. And how do you advise people to find their purpose?
Well, that's really hard. I mean, like if I had that recipe, I'd be God. But I did write a book called The Seed, which is about, finding your purpose and happiness in life and work. And that book is about a guy who goes on a journey to find his purpose. He's been burned out at work. His boss gives him 2 weeks off and says, hey, I'm going to give you 2 weeks off to decide if you really want to work here or not. If you don't, then move on. But if you do, come back refreshed and energized. So he goes to a corn maze, and while he's there with his buddies, he meets a farmer who gives him a seed and says, find out where to plant the seed, and your purpose will be revealed to you. So he goes on a journey to find out where to plant the seed, ultimately realizing that he's supposed to plant his seed right where he is, in his job. And when you plant yourself where you are, you decide to serve and make a difference. You then grow into the leader that you're meant to be. So the idea is that to find your bigger purpose, you really start living with purpose and live on purpose and bring purpose to whatever you're doing. And I have found that when you do that, you start to become a conduit for the bigger purpose that moves through you.
Sure, sure. Well said, and I loved that book, The Seed, as well. I have all of your books. You know, you and I talked about this. You worked with Dabo Sweeney and the Clemson football team for the last few years, I think, and you watched him sort of put Clemson football on the map, right? And you watched him suffer that heartbreaking defeat in 2015, to Alabama in the national championship game. And then you, I believe, were right beside him too, also when they won this past season in the rematch against Alabama. What did Dabo tell his team after the national championship loss in 2015? Kind of, how did he rebuild and reboot those guys to come back out and do what they did the next season? And what do you think it is that makes him such a special leader?
So after the loss, I was in the locker room and I heard him say, guys, I've never been more proud of a group of men than I am of you tonight. We just didn't make enough plays to be a team as good as Alabama. He said, you upperclassmen, you have left a legacy that will live on at Clemson. You underclassmen, he said, get ready, because we're coming back. And for the next 5 to 10 minutes, he literally talked about how they were going to come back and what they were going to do for spring football and then training camp and get ready for that. And he went on and on about the future. And in that moment, I realized that positive leaders, despite the circumstances, regardless of the setbacks, are always pointing their teams forward. I mean, they just lost the national championship.
Right.
And you think they'd be upset and despair. Here he was talking about the future. He doesn't dwell on the past for long. He's looking forward. And that's what positive leaders do. And he believed that they were going to come back. I mean, he truly believed it. And with his team, I mean, it was this belief that, you know what? We have everything it takes to be successful. Let's go after it. Let's attack it again. Let's not expect that's going to happen without our work, but let's work towards it. And what makes him such a special leader is that optimism. It's that belief. It's that vision. He doesn't allow the negative circumstances to get him down. He knows that circumstances don't define us, but we define our circumstances with our faith and our hard work. So he really does create inside out, not outside in. He's a huge inside out leader.
Okay.
And then with Clemson, it was always like, we're Clemson. Let's focus on Clemson. Let's focus on what we do. It's not about anything else. So it's all about inside, not outside. Neat. He's huge on love and accountability. That's the key to any great leader. I wrote about this in The Power of Positive Leadership.
Right.
I mean, I really distilled it down that positive leaders, the best leaders in the world, provide both love and accountability. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm seeing over and over again. Like, it's like, hey, I love you, which he does, and they know it, they feel it. They're family, and they really do feel like family. But I'm going to push you to be your best, and I'm not going to let you settle for anything less than your best. So he does not let them settle. Like he said, in that podcast interview I did with him, like, hey, Christian Wilkins, like, you were an All-American last year, but that's not this year.
Right.
And I love that approach. Like, he's already, like, nudging the guy, pushing the guy, tweaking the guy, making him uncomfortable. Like, hey, let's go be great. So it's this blend of both love and accountability. A lot of leaders have a lot of accountability, but they don't have the love piece down. Mm. And then a lot of them have the love, but they don't push their people to be great. So it's that combination of the two that makes them special. And also then what makes him special is his faith. He's a guy that has a lot of faith, gone through a lot of hard times, and he just has a great, happy, positive outlook on life.
Well, he's just I don't know Dabo, but looking from the outside in, he just seems like a guy who, he wants to put those guys on the field and he wants to win football games for sure, but he loves them. It feels like more than he even wants to win.
Yes, very much so. I mean, Very much so. He is all about the relationships, and like if they don't win, he's okay with that. Like if we don't win it, we don't win it.
Right.
I was in his office 3-4 years ago, and he said, "I know." He goes, "We're gonna get there one day, and I don't know when, but we're gonna get there one day." And he wasn't saying like next year, the year after. He just said, "We're gonna get there one day."
Right.
And it was so cool to see it come to fruition, because I would always go visit him during training camp at the start of the season and speak to the team, and then I would go at some point to speak to the team before one of the the big games during the year. So it was always like this, 2 times, getting a feel for where they were, and I've been there after some big losses, after big wins, and it's just cool to see that like he never wavered. Like even when they lost, it's like, it's all right, what's next? Let's go. What's next? How are we gonna get better? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna improve? And it was always about, and even now it's like, okay, we won a national championship. All right, great, but what are we going to do to get better?
Sure.
I mean, after they won the national championship, he's in the locker room. He said, guys, you're national champions. I'm so proud of you. He goes, but don't let this be the best thing that's ever happened.
That is such a cool line.
Yeah, he said it can't be. He said,
so cool.
He said, go be great husbands. I want you to be great fathers. He said, the best is yet to come for you. I mean, I'm like, whoa.
Oh, that's such a neat thing to say. And it's true. I mean, you don't want the best moment in their lives to be at 20 or 18 or 22. I mean, well, he's a special man. And you've worked with a lot of teams, right? Both in business and in sports. And can you give me an example of a team that you worked with that maybe was stuck in some negative behaviors and how you talked to them about their transition and the transformation really that they needed to make and wanted to make?
I mean, more so, it's not as many teams for companies because it's mostly leaders that people are bringing me in to speak to the leaders.
Okay.
But even with the leadership teams, for instance, like there's been a few teams, again, I can't say who they are, but on the corporate side, but yeah, there was a lot of dysfunction. There was a lot of lack of communication. There was no connection. And so what we did was, we just talked about what are the principles of great teams. And, that's where I did You Win in the Locker Room first. And we talked about being a connected team, being committed, and great communication, and how that works. And then I leave and they, respond like a month later, for instance, and said, yeah, we are all so much more committed now. We're more connected. We're communicating better. And I'm not even sharing a lot of, it's not rocket science. It's really simple stuff, but it's just getting them to get rid of the clutter and to focus on what matters most.
Sure.
And invest in those relationships with each other, and that changes everything. And, I worked with the Dodgers last year and spoke to them during spring training and talked about being a connected team. And, Dave Roberts sent me a nice note, and it's something that I'm going to share at some point. He said I could share it. And it was just, talked about how, helping them become more connected really kept them strong throughout the season. And so a lot of times it's just sharing these principles and this truth that leaders recognize, and then they basically say, okay, how can we implement this and put this into action?
Well, and it's funny what you're sharing. To me, it really strikes a chord, and I think it's so interesting because to me, sometimes the differentiator isn't really just the talent, right? It's the relationships and the connection, which is what obviously you're saying. And, are there like 1 to 2 exercises that you can share that would help a leader who's listening, or even a coach that's listening, to bring their team closer that you've used or done to create greater connection and stronger relationships?
Yeah, I was with an executive team, and we went around and had each person share a defining moment in their life. And it's one of my favorite exercises, because when you get to know someone's defining moment, you get to know their story. When you know their story, you get to know them.
Sure.
You really know them a lot better. So each person would go around and share a defining moment that made them who they are today. And you intentionally do it. And it is so powerful if each person does that. You can just see the walls of ego and pride and selfishness just come crumbling down, and that vulnerability and authenticity just starts to pave the way for like meaningful connections and a great relationship. And I've done this with both businesses and sports teams, and it's just such a powerful exercise. One of my favorites. And
that's cool.
The other idea is the one-word exercise. Anyone could do this, where each member of the team picks a word for the year that's going to drive them to be their best. And then you go around and share the word you picked and why you picked it. Like, why is that word important to you? And why is that word something that will drive you with more meaning and passion and purpose? And when you get to know each other's words, it's really a great exercise. I had a guy who managed the team at Pepsi, and then he went to Reebok and did this. And you've had tons of companies and schools like all over the country are doing the one-word exercise as well.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, you were telling me when we were together that was what you did with Dabo, and love was his word, right?
Love after the national championship.
That's super cool.
When they won, he said, "Love's been my word all year."
That's neat.
He said, "I told the guy that our love for each other was going to make the difference."
Wow. You know, the first book of yours that I read that I also really enjoyed is The Energy Boss. And probably a majority of the people that listening today have probably read it too. And if they haven't, they should. But everyone always remembers the energy vampires. And so can you talk a little bit about the energy vampires and what do you advise, maybe you can speak to it, what you tell people to do about some of these energy vampires in our life?
Well, I think that's why the Energy Boss, has spread so much, because it deals with the negativity that exists on almost every team and in every organization. Everyone has energy vampires on their team. Most of us have it in our families.
Sure.
So it's something that we do have to deal with. And, the thing about energy vampires is no one really wants to be negative. I don't think people sometimes know they're an energy vampire. Energy vampires, they can't see their reflection in the mirror, so they're not evaluating themselves. And also, energy vampires, I often say, don't like the light. So when you are positive, they often stay away. And energy vampires will often self-identify themselves. They often do an event and so forth. When I'm speaking and you get that one question from an energy vampire, you just know. And they're in every team and organization. But the thing is, first, try to transform them. So as a leader, lead with love and empathy, where perhaps that person's negative for a reason. Perhaps they've been betrayed by leaders in the past. Perhaps they've had a bad experience with team members. So maybe find out where that person is and see if you can lead them in a more positive way and help that person change. I've had a lot of success stories with leaders and teams I've worked with that have done this, and it's been pretty incredible. Now, it doesn't always work, though. There are some people, no matter what you do, they just will not change. And that's after you try to transform and they won't change, and they're sabotaging the team. At that point, you have to remove. I wrote about this in the new book because since the Energy Bus has been out for a while, people, are almost using it in a negative way. They're saying, you're either on my bus or off the bus. And so people are removing immediately.
Interesting.
Or separating people immediately and excluding people when that was never the intention. So I actually wrote a whole chapter in this book on how to deal with the negativity and how to deal with energy vampires in a positive, practical way. And I often say, don't be negative about negativity.
Nice. I like that. Sure.
Yeah. So it's been really good. So the whole framework is this. You identify, you confront, you must confront and actually deal with it. Too many people don't confront, so they allow it to exist, then it persists and winds up spreading and destroying the team. So you do have to confront it. Then you try to transform it. If you can't transform it, then you must remove it. On the transforming side, had a leader at 7th Generation. He put up a sign in his office that said, "Energy vampires welcome, expect to be transformed."
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, which I thought was great. And,
sure.
And so now that makes it a little more practical to take the principles from the Energy Bus, but now you can apply it in a very practical way.
Sure, and influence others in a really positive way, which is what it's all about. And you talked about tough conversations, and leaders, I believe, have to be able to have tough conversations. And I think learning how to give and receive feedback is so important. What's the best way to deliver feedback so it's clear, positive, authentic, and of course honest?
I read about this, and then I included it in this new book. The Penn State volleyball coach. I mean, he's a legend, and he has a 1-minute drill where, ongoing throughout the year, he meets with his players for 1 minute, and he says, "Here's what you're doing great. Here's where you need to improve, and here's what I want you to focus on during the next training cycle. Any questions?" And just doing that ongoing is such a great idea for any business manager, for any leader to meet with your team ongoing is a great way to just start to have that dialogue of what you need to do, how you need to improve, feedback, and growth. I also love talking about vision with team members and saying, okay, here's our vision for the road ahead, or let's come up with a vision together.
Okay.
More powerful.
Sure.
And then what's your personal vision? And then each person shares their personal vision. And then from there, okay, how can I help you achieve it? So now you're engaged with that person. They feel like you're there to coach and mentor them, guide them, and you are. And then it's, how can I hold you accountable to it? And then, of course, how does what your personal vision, how does it contribute to our bigger vision? So everyone's personal vision should be aligned towards the bigger vision that we have as an organization. So you may have some personal visions and some personal goals that maybe have nothing to do with the company, but let's figure out how those personal goals to be more creative, to be smarter, to work harder, to grow in this capacity, to be a better leader. Let's see how I can help you grow in that. And as I help you grow, you'll help us grow.
Sure.
And if I grow you out of a job,
right.
If I grow you out of a job, that's actually a good thing. I've actually done my job
right.
as a leader to now develop the next generation of leaders coming up.
And I wish more leaders felt that way, right? That they believe, like, I want to create people that can one day take over my role, because hopefully I'm continuing to grow and they'll grow, and obviously that's good for the business. So one last question, what advice, if I'm inside of an organization and maybe the culture isn't exactly where I want it, or it's not as positive as I want it, what's like one, if somebody's listening to this and they're inside of an environment and maybe they're not the leader and the culture's not great, and they're a pretty positive person, let's say, what advice would you give them to try to help make that shift happen at a kind of a bigger level beyond themselves?
Every one of us can lead where we are, right? John Maxwell talks about leading from where you are. So the idea is you make your bus great, and you drive your bus, and you make an example and a model for everyone in the organization. Because your culture is made up of everyone in your team and organization. So everyone is creating the culture by what they think, by what they say, and by what they do. So influence the people around you. From my book, The Carpenter, right? Love, serve, and care. Every day, love others, love your job, love your work. Find ways to serve others. Find ways to show you care. And if you do that, you can't help but have an influence on the people around you. And you can't help but exponentially grow your influence. Now, you may be in such a dysfunctional culture that it just can't move beyond that. At that point, okay, maybe you look for another opportunity.
Right.
Maybe there's a better culture.
Right.
Or maybe by doing that, this has happened often, you get promoted.
Right.
And as you get promoted, you now step into the leadership position.
Sure.
So I think so often we're looking in the outside again. We're looking at circumstances. We're looking at events, but we're not doing enough of creating inside out. So we know that we have the power on the inside to create the culture on the outside, and that's where real change happens. And I've seen that over and over again. People have done that, and include them in the book to show how people at leaders at every level of the organization can do that.
Yeah, no, that I couldn't agree with you more. You can lead from wherever you are, and you start unfolding every single day and infusing positive energy in your day and your life and your work, and it's hard to not let it flow over into others, right? It's like a cup of water overflowing.
Yes, and that's what I did. When I started speaking and writing, it was like 2 people at my events and 4 people and 5 people, and it was just go wherever and make a difference, one person at a time. And here we are now.
Yeah, now you got a little more than 4 in the room, John.
12, 13 years later, it just exponentially grows. But there's no such thing as an overnight success. So imagine if you, at work, just had lunch with a different person every week within your office, or a different person from a different department. Once a week, you just picked one person, invited them to lunch, and you did that every week. Think about the impact and the influence you would have over time if you did that.
You have been so gracious with your time. We end every podcast with rapid fire questions. So I'd love to fire some ones at you, and you can just fire back what comes up for you. Does that sound good?
Fire away.
Fire away, baby. So morning person or night person?
Morning.
Nice. One word to describe yourself.
Authentic.
Nice. Who is your mentor?
Ken Blanchard, author of The 1 Minute Manager.
Really? Okay, cool. What is your biggest fear?
Something happening to my kids. It used to be my parents dying, and then they both passed away. And so now my fear is, losing my kids, of course.
Yeah. I can certainly attest to you on that. I have 3 girls, and we've talked about that, but that's mine too. What's your favorite book?
That's so hard because there's been so many books that have inspired me on this journey.
Sure.
But it's a newer one by Jon Gordon called All the Places to Go. How Will You Know? And it combines faith and like Dr. Seuss rhymes, and it's like the most brilliant book I've ever read in my life. It's just
neat.
It's incredible.
Okay, and, I'm ordering it.
My favorite book that I've written is Training Camp, because it's about a guy who has to overcome his fear and find his faith on the journey. So I love that.
That's one of your favorite. And you've written, John, how many books have you written?
17.
God, wow. You pump out like one a year, don't you? You've got a nice cadence on that.
One a year, usually right every December.
Okay. What would you say is your greatest accomplishment?
Convincing my wife to marry me and then to stay married to me when she almost left. And then I would say, I'm proud that I've become a more positive dad and husband on the journey, because that has made all the difference.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's enhanced your relationship just multifold with your kids.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Everything.
What was your first job?
Yeah, I was an umpire was my first job. As a teenager, I used to umpire Little League baseball games. Then I blacktop driveways, did some painting, and then after college, was a bartender and got my master's in teaching at Emory while I was bartending in Atlanta.
And then you shifted into this space?
Yes. And then, a lot of other things happened after that. But yeah, master's in teaching, taught, went to law school for a year and a half, dropped out, went to workfor.com, thought I was going to make my billions, lost my job, then opened up some restaurants, sold them, and then knew I wanted to focus on writing and speaking. That was my focus, my passion, my calling.
Your purpose.
Didn't know if the restaurants were going to make it, by the way. Like, second mortgage our home, $20,000 credit card. When we opened up it was the Moe's Southwest Grill in Florida. First Moe's in Florida we were.
Oh, wow. Okay, sure.
So I brought Moe's to Florida. I was their first franchisee, and then, built Moe's into a successful, brand within the Jacksonville area, and then knew I wanted to write and speak, and it was time to sell. But that first Moe's was the scariest moment of my life, because we second mortgage our home and put everything we had in. Oh, my
gosh, John. Wow. What is your life motto?
Being positive doesn't just make you better, it makes everyone around you better. And my vision, though, is to inspire and empower as many people as possible, one person at a time. And once I realized that this is what I was born to do and meant to do, that's when that vision came to me. I said, okay, inspire a lot of people, but always make time for that one person.
Wow, on that, let's wrap. I tell you what, that clear purpose drives everything, doesn't it? And that's where we started our talk.
It does, because if you have that purpose and you're running around real busy, but that person reaches out to you and needs help, and you don't take time for that person, then you're not really living that purpose.
Sure.
So I gave my cell the other day, spoke at a conference, and gave my cell number out, and then had like 5 or 6 people text me, and then I made time to respond, and then one person's probably going to want to get on a call, so I will. And if you do that, again, it's not like Andy Stanley said it best. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone.
Oh,
right?
I like that.
Yeah, you can't help millions of people every day, but you can help that one every day. And if you do that ongoing, think about how many lives you'll touch day in and day out.
Sure, because that one person leaves and helps one more or 5 more.
It's a ripple effect.
No question. No question. John, thank you so much.
Thanks, Molly. You're awesome. Keep up the amazing work.
Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.